nice day. Andiamo,
Are we ready to go? Okay,
yeah, we're
okay.
ready to go.
Let's go. Let's go. It's so exciting.
Oh,
Oh, wait.
what?
We're forgetting something.
The
The hats.
Oh my gosh. You got him?
Here you go. Here's the hats. Okay, let's go. We're so exciting. Okay. Oh, wait. We forgot something else. The checkerboard.
Oh, we
can't go without a friendly game of checkers, right?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, now, are you going to lock the door?
I thought I'd wait until we were driving to do that. All right, here we go.
Okay.
Okay. All right, I think we're ready.
Let's go.
All right, so we are headed to Elk Island National Park, and according to Google Maps, it should only take 35 minutes from our shop in Edmonton to the visitor center in Elk Island Park. But that's currently up for debate because Barb and I have a side bet going on how long it's going to take.
Check this out. This is my mitered square. It's going to be a part of a blanket, and it's using our yarnicorn. This bright green color is called 1 in a Million, and then it's a beautiful hand-painted cotton, and then I'm teaming it with a really nice gray from our Camp Color line. And yeah, Google says we have about 9 more kilometers till we reach the park, and so I think I've got time to finish 2 more rows on I have my pattern right up here on my memory board, and my Tim's. I'm set. Look at that. You and Google Maps. And road construction, so I guess we made real good time.
Mm-hmm. And I didn't speed. All right, so my name is Cynthia, and I am one of the co-owners of River City Yarns, a fiber shop in Edmonton, Alberta. We've been in business for, Barb's been in business for 20 years, since we were teenagers, really. It's what I sort of think of it as, and our customers are really, really interested in, of course, knitting and crochet, but also in different kinds of fiber. And one of the things that's really cool, I think, about our customers is that they're engaged in an activity that they can take anywhere with them. So
right,
it goes camping, right, and it goes on hikes and things like that. And I'll turn it over to you, Barb.
Sure. Hi, my name's Barb, and I'm Cynthia's partner, and we have been in business for 20 years.
Congratulations.
Amazing how fast it's gone. But yes, I think, going out to the park is pretty exciting for a fiber enthusiast, because I think we all have visions of, running across some, bison fiber hanging on a tree. But what we thought we would do today, Tristan, is maybe get a little bit of a sense from you, kind of like your background. So I invite you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Okay, so y'all are River City Yarns. So I'm Tristan Drozdiak. I'm an interpreter at Elk Island National Park. I've been working there. This will be my 10th season in the spring. So I've been there for a little bit of time now. And I myself am from Edmonton. So love having y'all come on here. It's like the closest national park to us. You can just kind of like 30 minutes east of Edmonton. So it's nice within reach.
Tristan, why don't you tell us a little bit about the history of the park and why it's important? It's designated as a national park, and why that is.
Absolutely. So Elk Island had humble beginnings. We were started in 1906 because there were 5 gentlemen from Fort Saskatchewan who noticed the local elk populations were dwindling, and effectively created a little wildlife reserve for the remaining elk in the area. And it was just a little tiny park at the time in 1906, around what's now called a Stoughton Lake, just south of Lamont. And our park has certainly evolved over time and become, I would say, very important in a lot of different respects. Not the least of which, so in 1906 we were made, and I like to say we're a year older than Jasper National Park. They were made in 1907. Also in 1907 is when we lucked into getting one of the last largest herds of bison in North America. So this is particularly important because bison were once the icon of the West, 30 million in number, we think, for thousands and thousands of years, stretching across most of Western Canada, most of the United States. When you think of the quote unquote prairies, the bison were a keystone species for this. Incredibly important for ecosystems, but incredibly important for First Nations peoples. They continue to be so. I've heard them described as Walmart and church for Indigenous peoples, where same way maybe some Christians would go to church for a lot of Indigenous groups, it was the bison that was, or buffalo, you could say, was of central importance spiritually, but then also materially. You needed something, you needed a fly swatter, you could get a bison tail. You needed like a bag, you could use the bison's bladder. You needed like something to transport your fire in. You could take the horn sheath once the bison had passed. So all sorts of items that could be used from the bison. So bison were of tremendous importance to the area we live in for, like I said, thousands and thousands of years. But in the 1800s, in a single human lifetime, we went from roughly 30 million bison to less than 1,000. So bison very nearly went extinct. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, which we can get into if you like. But when the park was started in 1907, when we mentioned that, when the park received these bison in 1907, there were barely any left in the continent. And we lucked into getting one of the largest herds of them from a gentleman named Michel Pablo. He was Indigenous descent himself in the Blackfoot down in what's now Montana. I guess Montana for him still then, but yeah, the Blackfoot. And we ended up getting about 500 bison from him. And they were brought up here by train car just north of Elk Island. There's the town of Lamont. They've got a train station, and those bison were brought in. And one of my favorite bits about that is Michel Pablo came himself and to see these bison off. And it was said, there's like some newspaper clippings from that era, that when he came, one of the bison calves kind of escaped into the bushes, and Michel Pablo walked up and perfectly imitated the call of a mother buffalo and called it back. So this kind of like larger than life character been with these buffalo for quite a few years at this point. And his final words to them when he left them at Elk Island was, "So long, boys." And so from Michel Pablo, from the Flathead Indian Reservation in Montana, we received one of the largest herds of this iconic species. And since that time, since 1907, we protected the bison, we protected the buffalo, and almost like nurturing a little flame that's about to go out, we've protected that population, we've grown it, and we do transfers. For the last 50 years or so, we've been considered, we've had both the plains and wood bison. They're considered genetically pure, they're considered disease-free, and we do transfers to them all sorts of places. Just last year, we did a transfer of our plains bison to the number of indigenous groups. So Kainai Blood, Onion Lake Cree Nation, Frog Lake First Nation, Palmaker Cree. This year, we're doing wood bison transfer and to a number of places as well. And yeah, we've become the heart of bison conservation in Canada. Most bison trace their roots. Most bison in Canada trace their roots back to Elk Island National Park. Many bison throughout the continent now trace their roots back to here as well. Some other kind of, I would say, like very high profile or maybe transfers of interest to your viewers is lots of folks have heard of Banff National Park. Banff National Park were without bison for about a century. They historically had bison with the buffalo, but when the decline happened, they didn't have them for a long time, at least not in the wild. And then I believe it was 2017 from Elk Island National Park, again, we're the seed herd for bison for buffalo. They were 16 of them were transferred from Elk Island National Park to the outskirts of Banff National Park. And they were driven there and then they were helicoptered in. If you have a chance to see that video, that's wild. But yeah, helicoptered over, and they've been thriving there since. So bringing bison back to the land. People may have heard of that, may not have known that. But yeah, our bison we received in 1907, and we've been working to kind of, like I said, protect that population, grow that population since that time. And we send them all over the place. And that's one of the reasons why we were important enough to become a national park. Another big part of it as well is we're in a biodiversity hotspot. We're in this transition zone between the prairies to the south and the vast prairies to the south and the vast boreal forest to the north. We're in a region called Aspen Parkland, which in the last century or so has dwindled a ton. So we're protecting that kind of like unique ecosystem. But then additionally, you may have heard a term bandied about, maybe not, is the Beaver Hills. And we are a core part of the Beaver Hills, Elk Island National Park. Certainly not the only part of it. I'll explain more about that, I guess, throughout our chat here. But we were made, so this, yeah, we're part of these unique places ecologically, whether it be the Aspen Parkland, the transition between the boreal forest to the north and the prairies to the south. Also part of this, the Beaver Hills with lots of wetlands. And there's all sorts of species that call our park home. People hear bison, and rightly so. Like I explained, that's a huge part of what we've done, like our legacy or how we've contributed. But you've also got the beaver. I mean, okay, your viewers, I can relate to this a ton because I'm Edmontonian and y'all are River City Yarns. I imagine lots of viewers based out of Edmonton, but there's huge ties between Edmonton and the Beaver Hills. In fact, I would go so far as to say our lives, such as we know it in Edmonton, would not exist without the Beaver Hills. And Elk Island protects a core part of what that is. So this region, so Elk Island and the Beaver Hills is just east of Edmonton. Folks might be familiar, about 10, 12,000 years ago, this land was covered in ice and glaciers from the Ice Age, and the surrounding region, the glaciers started to melt away. Edmonton, from what I understand, was a big lake, but there were still a couple of glaciers that were meeting just east of Edmonton in the Beaver Hills, and they didn't exist until the glaciers scraped against each other, departed, one for the west and towards the mountains, one towards the northeast into the Shield. And as they did that, they ground up the land. They took boulders along with them, depositing material all along the place. They added in, the gouged out little pockets would fill up with water, especially as they melted. And it became these hills and hollows, this knob and kettle topography. And it created these hills with wetlands, which was great for beavers. And so when we say Beaver Hills, it's this large area. Elk Island's kind of at the top of it. And it extends about 50 kilometers south to Miquelon Lake Provincial Park. It's just this big blob to the east of Edmonton, basically. And arguably, it's why Edmonton exists. So the Beaver Hills, again, from this glacial creation, was fantastic habitat for beaver. You've got these wetland areas. It's stays a little bit higher than the surrounding area, a little bit elevated compared to Edmonton. You'll notice that on the drive out east. But it's got tons and tons of aspen trees, aspen forest, this aspen park, kind of like we were talking about. And it welcomed lots of species, which I'll get into later, but the beaver absolutely being a huge part of that. And when we get the name Beaver Hills, it comes from the Cree or Nehewiwin Amiskwichis, meaning Beaver Hills, because for thousands and thousands of years, pretty much since the Beaver Hills were created, Indigenous peoples of a variety of backgrounds were using the hills as places to gather and to meet, as places to refuel and restock. I like to say that we found stone sawdust, if you will, scattered throughout Elk Island and certainly throughout the Beaver Hills, where we know there have been Indigenous camps for at least 8,000 years old. So people have been using these Beaver Hills for thousands upon thousands of years. But then in terms of getting Edmonton made, Edmonton started off as Fort Edmonton. What they were looking for were beaver pelts. And the place they got it from were the Beaver Hills. The Beaver Hills helped create and shape Edmonton that way. We wouldn't be here without them. Yeah, what makes Elk Island special and a national, like worthy being a national park? Certainly this bison history, the bringing back this iconic species, but then being a core part of these natural regions. So the Beaver Hills itself, being part of this aspen parkland, this wetland area, and this biodiversity hotspot. So we've got so many species in the park. Certainly there's the bison or the buffalo. They're the elk, although they're a little bit harder to see. They are there though. We've got several hundred of them in the park. There's moose, there's deer. We now have black bears again in the park. So lots of the bigger species, but we're a hugely important area for breeding birds in the springtime. Spring's one of my favorite times a year, and it's basically here right around the corner, and one of the best times to go out and explore the park because there's new life just everywhere. And so there's 250 species of the birds that have been spotted in Elk Island, and a lot of them come for that springtime.
Is that a crow?
Yeah, I think so. So quiet, hey? The sound of our feet and the crow. We'll mucky here, watch your step.
Okay.
Oh, it says try to make a noise like a woodpecker.
Close.
That's kind of cool. Oh, the chipmunks don't like it. Chipmunks, there's no chipmunks here, are there? Squirrels.
And they come for those wetland areas created by the glaciers from the Beaver Hills kind of idea. And if you've ever had the chance to hear the cackle of a redneck grebe, we've got those a lot in Stoughton Lake, kind of one of the main lakes that you can certainly come and knit or crochet around. And the pelican soaring across the lake is one of my favorite views. Anyway, to get to your historically, what's made Elk Island special enough to be a national park, absolutely the bison, absolutely the fact that we're this biodiversity hotspot, being a part of the aspen parkland transition between the prairies and the boreal forest, and being part of the Beaver Hills and just welcoming a diversity of life. I can absolutely speak to what's the difference between a bison and buffalo. I've been using the terms interchangeably.
Okay.
Depends on what kind of hat you're wearing. If you're wearing a scientist's hat, we only have bison in North America. There are two subspecies. There's the plains bison, which go from with the very original name of bison, and then the wood bison, the largest land mammal in North America, weighing over 2,200 pounds on average for the males, or 1,000 kilos, bison athabascae. Buffalo, again with the scientist's hat, exists elsewhere. You've got like the Cape buffalo, South Africa, the water buffalo of India, that kind of thing. However, for the last couple of centuries, you've had indigenous peoples, you've had cowboys referring to the animals we have here in North America as buffalo. You've probably heard of Head Smashed In Buffalo Jump. You've probably heard of Wood Buffalo National Park. So by and large, you can use the terms interchangeably, unless you're talking to a scientist, in which case we have bison, period. Yeah, one of the nice things about Elk Island, like there's so much with national parks, especially here. We're so lucky in Alberta to have Banff and Jasper and these majestic, iconic mountains, these like really big moments and experiences. And not that you can't have them in Elk Island, but I find Elk Island really lends itself to some of these smaller, more intimate experiences where if you I think if you're into knitting and crocheting, you're one of those people who's maybe a little bit better at taking things a little bit more calmly and allowing things to come to you. There's a lot that you can experience at the park.
I like that you said that, Tristan, because I like to think that us crafters are good at unplugging, you know?
Yes.
So you have to put down the social media in order to pick up the knitting needles. So yeah, I think that's a fair point. All right, so Brian, we're in this really interesting kind of structure here. What is this place that we're standing in right now?
Yeah, so this is a bison handling facility in Elk Island National Park. There's actually two of them, one on the north side and one on the south. As I think I mentioned, the north side actually supports plains bison population, and the south has a wood bison. So they're two different subspecies, so they keep them separate. You do not want them to interbreed. And so there are two of these facilities. And basically they use these facilities to handle animals when they're processing them for checking for health risks, or if they're processing them getting them ready to go to another park or another area for their conservation work. They have sent the wood bison to Russia previous to this year 2 or 3 or 4 times. They've sent plains bisons down to Montana, to several First Nations communities as well in Saskatchewan and other areas. Into Banff National Park, they sent some wood bison recently. You probably heard about that in the news. They're sending some to Alaska this year. So it is an area that they're using in terms of making sure that there's genetic diversity in some of these other populations and allowing them to grow these other populations so that they're self-sustaining.
Yeah, nice.
For example, the wood bison that have been shipped to Russia have established, and they're actually about 30% bigger at the same age there than they are here, because that habitat is completely open. And they're replacing what was the steppe bison in that area that went extinct, right? So the wood bison is ecologically sort of equivalent. So obviously they're in good habitat because they're happy, they're getting big, right? And they're starting to establish their own populations. So
it's not cool.
Very, very cool work. Yeah.
Okay, Barb, so here we are at, what's it called? The lake?
I don't know.
We'll find the name for you in a second. But we're gonna take a little walk.
A little hike.
Yeah, but before we do that, tell me
on a search for bison.
Tell me what you're wearing.
Oh, I'm wearing
Rotunda?
Rotunda, yes. This is baby alpaca, you guys, and it's so soft and cozy. It's perfect. And I'm wearing 2 coats out here because it's really freezing.
So Barb's Rotunda hat is designed by Nigel Potter.
Yeah.
And you did say it's out of alpaca. And I'm wearing Not Flying by Kate Atherley in our Eden soft merino cashmere nylon. Okay, so we're ready for a little walk, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Here we
Let's
go.
What do you think? Is that the elusive bison fiber?
I think it might be.
Oh my God.
Sure. Okay. One of the first things I would say is we have a number of red chairs. So there's a red chair program in the Parks Canada system. They're placed at particularly scenic views throughout the park. So that you find them in Banff, Jasper, throughout the other 40 plus national parks in Canada. But some of my favorite ones in Elk Island would just be so great if you were knitting and crocheting, whether it's during the day or one of my favorite things about the park are some of the sunsets we have around Stoughton Lake, and that would just pair so beautifully. So there's a couple red chairs. There's one near where I work out of most of the time called the Stoughton Theater, and so Stoughton Lake is kind of like the main recreational lake in the park. You drive about half hour east of Edmonton, you get to our visitor center, which I'll come back to, and you go about 15 minutes more into the park. So towards the north end of the park, and there's this main lake that you can recreate at. But there's a Stoughton Theater where we do interpretive programs. That's where I work out of. You can come asking for Tristan. I'd be delighted to meet you in person. And just near that theater is one of the red chairs, and it overlooks what's known in our kind of historical maps and whatnot as Sunset Bay, and it's no lie some of the most gorgeous sunsets that I've experienced. I love coming back there for that, and I think that would pair so nicely during the day, or especially for the sunsets on those red chairs with some knitting needles, crocheting, whatnot.
I was just wondering, Tristan, if you could tell us a little bit more about the Stargazing program.
Yeah, yes, I can. I only laugh because I do so much of that. Yeah, okay, so I've mentioned this term, the Beaver Hills, a bunch already. I'll probably mention it a couple more times, but I believe it's 2006, we were made into part of the Beaver Hills Dark Sky Preserve. So again, that's the Beaver Hills. It's more than just Elk Island. It extends down Miquelon Lake and a lot of other places in between. But we certainly do our part to take part in that. So this is partly to cut down on light pollution. In Edmonton, it's a lovely city, but like most cities in the world, we've got so many lights that it washes out the stars. And makes it hard for stargazing, first of all, whether you're an amateur or you're like an actual astronomer, but it's bad for nature. A lot of animals don't do well with this. It's called light pollution. And so this Beaver Hills area has got very few lights. So do be careful when you're driving in the park at night. There's very few lights. Make sure to go the speed limit so you don't run upon anything in the dark. But it makes it so that wildlife around you is additionally protected. So a lot of the mammals, like the bison, the moose, the elk, the deer, the beavers, they don't fight off ourselves. We don't fight off infection as well with constant light during the day and during the night. So they're protected. Plants become less confused. They get confused. They measure what year it is, or time of year it is, the season, by the length of darkness, and they can be confused into thinking that the middle of the winter is the spring by having light pollution. So that's not great. And birds, I love birds. There's so many different fun views I've had out of the park, but they often are attracted to light, much like insects, and they will fly into illuminated buildings. And we estimate 100 million die in North America alone each year. So speaking to the stargazing, it's more than just that. It's this dark sky preserve for nature broadly, but then it also dovetails extremely well with our own experiences. So if you are interested in seeing the stars, Elk Island's a fantastic place to come out for it. I myself lead a couple programs, and I've had some beautiful moments out there. If you're really lucky, you can catch the aurora out there as well, if you're interested in that, because it's great to see when it's around. Aurorawatch.ca, track and see when it's going to happen. But that same area where it sounds like you're going to be checking out on Sunday, the Stoughton Lake area is really nice, because Elk Island has a lot of aspen trees right now, which is great for the forest, but it blocks your view of the sky. So you want to go to stargaze in an area that's got as a clear sky view. And so that recreation area, that Stoughton day use area, is great for that.
How big is the park, Tristan? Like,
Sure.
what are you talking about?
It's roughly 200 kilometers square. I think it's a little less than that, 194, 196. Roughly speaking, it's 20 kilometers north-south and 10 kilometers east-west.
Wow. Okay. So
And when you drive in, sorry to cut you off there, Barb. When you drive in off of Highway 16, most folks are going to turn north into the park. That's where the visitor center is, and I'll come back to that in a second. But that's technically not all the park. You see towards the south, sometimes folks will see buffalo or bison along the parkway, along that Highway 16. There's the plains bison on the north side. There's the wood bison on the south, because the south is also Elk Island National Park. It's one of my favorite hiking trails, but it doesn't lend itself to the driving really at all. You kind of drive to a trailhead. It's 16 kilometers more or less around, but it's the only place to see the wood bison by foot. So just anyways, that's also part of the park I wanted to get across.
nice.
Yeah.
So there's parts of the park that can be driven quite easily, and then there's special parts of the park that can be hiked. And
Yes.
yes.
If you're out to come to the park, so many people want to see wildlife. I would say what a lot of people don't know is that wildlife is most active near sunrise and sunset. So whether you are going just simply driving in the park, and there's some good opportunities to see the wildlife that way, or you're going out for one of our hikes. We've got 11 hikes in the park, ranging from a couple of kilometers long to about 16 kilometers long. Sunrise and sunset, you're going to see a lot more stuff. And if that's what you're wanting to see, then that's what I recommend. And certainly that changes throughout the year. Like December is going to be different than June in terms of when sunrise and sunset is, but that's kind of like the wildlife witching hour, if you will. So that's one of the first things I would say. The second thing is, if you are going to go out for a hike, come prepared. If you're not familiar with the extent of what that means, Adventure Smart's a great resource. Again, our friends at the Visitor Information Center, even our visitor guide's a good thing. But generally speaking, dress for the weather. Make sure your cell phone's all charged. And bring enough food and water. Know where you're going. Some of the basic things like that.
Mhm.
And then I want to say this as well for our wildlife. You can have tremendous experiences with the wildlife in our park or anywhere, but respect them. Keep yourself and keep them safe. You're coming into their home, as it were. And so one of the things we've come to say is use your thumb, or give wildlife a thumbs up. So if you're out hiking, this is how you can tell if you're a safe distance away, whether it be from a big old bison or a smaller beaver or bird or what have you. And basically, arms straight out, pop a thumb up, close an eye. And if you can cover the individual animal up entirely with your thumb, you're likely a safe distance away.
When I was out at the park last, it
Yeah.
seemed like there were quite a few bison quite close. I mean, sometimes there was a fence between us, but other times it seemed like there was
Yes.
no fence. What's the story about the animal versus people? How close?
Yep,
do you
definitely.
get?
Okay, so Elk Island, and this is partly why we received the bison in 1907 in the first place, is we were a completely fenced park, and we still are. So when you drive into the park, so you come in east on Highway 16, you turn left to enter the park. To go north, you see the visitor center on the side, maybe stop there. You keep going up, you pass the payment kiosk, whatever the south gate entrance is, what we call it inside the park. And then you go across, whether you knew it was called that or not, the kind of cattle gate or the Texas gate. It's that kind of weird set of pipes along the ground that goes bump, 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 bump on your tires. And that makes it so that's basically the fence on the road. So the buffalo and whatnot won't exit. But as soon as you cross that, you are in the park with the wildlife, and you can, and it happens fairly frequently, where you can come right upon bison, the buffalo, right outside your car. The thing with being in a car is that allows you to be safely much closer to wildlife. One of the things you'll first notice, and it sounds like Barb and Cynthia, you're both familiar with this, is when you come into the park and you go across that gate or that kind of that guard, that bump, 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 pretty immediately on the right-hand side, you have our Bison Loop Road. And you can drive around that. And sometimes you get stuck in call it like a bison jam.
You had mentioned spring being a great time for little ones, and is there a time like do the bison calve? Like, is there
right
there?
Yes. So that's a trickier one. So I generally spring. It depends on the individual animal and when it got pregnant, all that kind of thing. But generally, you're looking between April and June, with May being more of a hot spot for that. The thing with the little reds, they're so cute, by the way, if you can spot one. But the trick with Parks Canada and coming out to parks is this balance between conservation and recreation. And so while we certainly would love for people to have the experience to see them, there will be times of year where we shut off access to certain areas because we want those little reds and their moms not to be so stressed. So the Bison Loop I mentioned earlier, we shut it down last spring just to give them a little bit more privacy and whatnot. So if you want to have these moments, one of the things I might recommend is, if you have them, binoculars are really good, because then you can have that moment still seeing them, but you're not necessarily stressing it.
Super. I thought of one more question.
Yeah, please.
The whole idea about conservation and sending these animals to other parks and things.
Right.
Are you always able to find a home for animals, for bison, and are there situations where you're overpopulated? Has that ever happened? What happens then?
Sure. That's a great question, Barb. And effectively, no, we're not always able to find homes for them. We've been doing this for a long time. And while we certainly always aim for places that have that conservation value first and foremost, you hit the nail on the head with overpopulation there. For a variety of reasons, Elk Island doesn't have much for predators, and the bison population does very well and consistently increases in a fixed space. And while the park has increased over the last century in terms of our park size, we can't really do that anymore, or not nearly so easily. And so, yes, if we have a surplus of bison, we will send them to auction. So there's a decent chance that if any of your viewers or yourselves have had bison meat from a bison ranch, it's very possibly linked genetically to the herd we have here in the park. But the rest of the year, like, we don't feed them in the spring. We don't help them calve. We usually alternate which year we're doing the handling for the wood bison or the plains bison. When we work with them, we'll put out some hay to attract them to us. But the other year, when we're not working with them, we don't do anything with them. So very hands-off, very much treated as wildlife in the park. Our bison handling has evolved over time. And 20, 30 years ago, we certainly had people on horseback, maybe that quote unquote more like cowboy style. If you go to the visitor center, the Wakotuan Visitor Information Center, just beyond it is a barn, which you're welcome to kind of walk around. But that's a historic barn. It was made in the 1930s, I believe, and it housed for nearly a century the horses that the wardens used here in the park. And so certainly for a number of decades, the bison or buffalo were corralled on horseback. In my time working at the park, and I think the last 20 years or so, we found other methods. We've moved away from horses. It certainly still involves that maybe more like quote unquote corralling style, but we do more of that on foot now.
Thank you so much for your time today, Tristan.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
So much.
Yeah. And
thank you.
That's going to inform our trip out to Elk Island Park very nicely. Perfect. Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, it's nice to take a little bit of a break, hey?
Oh, I tell you, my dogs are tired.
Yeah. Well, we've been hiking all day.
Yep.
And now we're at the lake.
Stoughton Lake.
And we're sitting in the red chairs.
Yeah.
These are pretty special chairs, you guys.
Yeah. Mine's up higher than yours, and I can actually swing my feet, so it's feeling pretty good.
All right.
Yeah. And
so we're taking a little break to do a little knit.
Yeah.
And look at the beautiful scenery.
Yeah.
Listen to the birds.
I'm working on my fuzzy foot socks.
Yeah, what are you knitting?
Yeah, fuzzy foot socks. Yeah,
Okay.
these are felted slippers, and we're doing a little game of checkers here with our felted checkerboard.
Yeah.
And I think it's your move.
Oh, okay. Already?
Yeah. Where are you gonna move?
Okay. Hang on. I have to think about that. Okay.
Oh,
Gotcha. Oh, that's Cynthia. You see,
Yeah.
she's pinned down
just try and move my checker piece. You.
Oh, man.
I see I've got some pinned down on the wrong squares too. But you know what's nice about this checkerboard, Barb?
Yeah.
Is that you can use it as a seat cushion. And I'm kind of
Yes.
thinking that's something I could use right now.
That's right. Yeah.
My butt is cold.
Yes, it is a little chilly. But you brought your blankets with you, right? You
Yeah,
brought
yeah,
your blankets.
yeah.
So that's good.
You know what? I'm going to put this down for a second and
Okay.
get cozy with a blanket.
There's something neat about sitting outside in the cold of winter, but being warm with blankets.
Yeah.
I got mine too.
Yeah.
Okay. This is the,
You got the Laurentian,
the Laurentian. Oh my
and I've
God.
got the Lodge.
Okay, this is perfect.
Isn't it cozy?
Yes.
Just soak in the sun, the winter sun, the quiet.
There's a few birds chirping in the background.
This is the life.
This is beautiful. Most people come here in the summer, and you know, nobody's here in the winter. This is
It's
perfect.
kind of nice, yeah.
Isn't it nice?
Yeah. I mean, I am wearing a down-filled coat
Yeah. And a hat.
and a hat.
Yeah. So what hat are you wearing? Not flying?
Not flying.
And I've got on little goose toque. Yeah.
Got my matching fingerless mitts. Might just have a nap.
I know. Okay, we spent the morning searching out bison, and it was amazing. We got up so close to the bison. There was a really big male one who was laying down having a snooze, and he didn't even care that we were
We
there.
can't say anything like this to our daughter.
He wouldn't move for anything. No. So, what a wonderful day. We think that this is a place that everybody should be able to experience, and we hope that you'll all come and visit Alberta and Elk Island Park.
National Park. Elk Island National Park.
Park. Yeah. Beautiful place.
Do the frogs too, man. Oh
Yeah,
my
the
God,
frogs
the
are
frogs are really good.
Oh
How
my
good that is,
God,
actually.
Cool.
that does sound like a moose.
That doesn't sound right. That sounds ridiculous. Don't use that. No, I can't do it now. I have stage fright.
Oops. Okay.
Hey, pass me your yoga mat.
Hang on.
We just need to make a round circle.
Don't look. You, Barb, it's licking my ear.
What is that? That sounds amazing.
I'm not sure. I was going to say a pigeon, but just kidding.
Yeah, so the squirrel he was like gnawing at it. He was like this, trying to get away, you know. Any strands he could of this knitted pot cozy. Oh man. Anyway.
I think you should have given him the rest of it.
Yeah.
Are we still rolling? Stop!
Yeah.
Stop!